Okay, so every time I start a persuasive speech unit, I like to talk about the Toulmin model. It's the one model that I had all my speech and debate students, particularly the debaters, really learn and understand, because it really helped with testing reasoning and identifying fallacies and counter arguments. And so I wanted to talk about the Toulmin model. It comes to us from Stephen Toulmin. And Toulmin is an English rhetorician. And basically what he did is he identified seven components to an argument, okay? We're going to talk about three that are relevant today. And when I ask you what an argument is, how would you define an argument? And not, oh, I got into an argument, but I made an argument. Yes, Brianna?
Trying to persuade somebody into your idea or...
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to gain adherence or agreement. You're trying to, make an argument to do so. And if you had to break that argument up, what would be the components of that argument? What would be the parts of it?
Yeah. Would it be kind of like your claim and your reasoning as to why?
Ah, there we go. Have you had this before? Claim, right? And then, you have your claim, and then where you said reasoning. Okay. What else do you have? What else do you need to make an argument, to try to persuade?
Evidence maybe? Or
Evidence, yeah, evidence, right? Evidence. Toulmin called it data, all right? And this is basically the support, the evidence, research you find to support your claim. And basically identified that there were a couple kinds of evidence. And so if I said that, let's say, Dominic is a good student, and that's my claim, okay? Dominic is a good enough student to get into UC Davis, okay? So that's my claim. Dom is a good student. What kind of evidence would I need to provide? You're applying to UC Davis to show that you are a good enough student. Grade point average. What else?
Maybe like the classes, activities.
The classes, activities, kinds of classes. There's activities, extracurriculars. What else? What if he's coming straight from high school? Well, actually, UC doesn't even require it anymore. SATs, huh? That's what you're thinking of, SATs. Let's just say they do. Okay? Yeah, diploma, he meets all the requirements, okay? There's something that UC requires that the CSU does not. Anybody know? The essay, yeah. Essay. All right, so if you're looking at these two little columns, what do they have in common? Or what do these two things have in common?
They're numbers.
They're numbers, okay? There you go. So this is quantitative evidence. Quantitative. And this is qualitative. So you have numeric and non-numeric, right? And so that's pretty common when if you go on to beyond a bachelor's and you want to do some research, a lot of times people have preference towards qualitative data, and they want to do surveys, and they want to do pre and post interviews and whatnot. Whereas sometimes there's people who like their quantitative. Those of you who like numbers probably do research that requires quantitative data. All right, so that's a little bit about evidence and data. We have reasoning, which Toulmin called a warrant. And it bridges the inferential leap from data to claims. In other words, it is the reasoning that connects the evidence to the claim, all right? And the claim can be, it's also known as your contention, assertion, and ultimately, you like it to be the conclusion. So you look at the evidence, and then the reasoning, and then you come up with the claim, all right? So a lot of times people will say, hey, which side of the argument should I take? And I say, well, have you done the research first? Because that will really help you determine what your claim should be. So let's talk about reasoning, or the warrant, really quickly. There's 5 common types of reasoning, okay? And the first is causation. And basically says A causes B. And there's different degrees of causation. So you have sufficient cause, which basically says that it's the main reason. For different disciplines, sufficient cause, you need to prove over 50% of it was the cause. So for instance, the other day I played soccer, and I had gone up to head a ball, and I didn't see this other guy, and his head hit my head. And we both laid on the ground after, and both agreed we were too old for this. And he said, we got up, and both were a little bit dizzy. and I still feel a little bit. And I know that I was concussed to a certain degree, right? And I was like, I could use this for my example here, that headbutt caused a concussion. And it's sufficient cause, because that's really the main reason, right? It wasn't, you could say, all right, one of the lights, because it was a night game, one of the lights was out, and we didn't see each other, so that kind of, could have caused it a little bit. But I would say that the light being out is more contributory. That it contributed, but it's not sufficient. Okay? It contributed, but it's not sufficient. And the reason this is important is because a lot of times people will overstate things like, and I've heard the speech, you've probably heard the argument, video games cause obesity, or video games cause violence, right? And you might say, all right, I can see that contributing, but how many other things are in that equation, right? There's so many other causes. And if there's other alternate causes, then how sufficient could it have been? Like in different fields, there's a different threshold. So like in the medical field, it's in the 90s, right? In other fields, it'll be in the 50s to call it sufficient. Otherwise, we call it correlation, okay? And sometimes people will say causation and correlation are kind of the same thing, or, it's not, they're not, but I think a lot of times people use it simultaneously or synonymously. It basically means A exists with B, but they don't necessarily cause it. A doesn't cause B, they just exist together, okay? Autumn and NFL football exist together. Do they cause each other? No, right? But you might say it's a strong correlation. It's a strong correlation because they exist consistently together. Okay? Whereas there's, another example is, I keep using these sports examples, but how many of you are Giants fans? San Francisco Giants fans. Okay? How many of you were sure, Brianna, were you sure that they were going to win, that 4th title because they won 3 times and it was an even year, right?
Yes, but your faith has to be strong.
Your faith has to be strong. But a lot of times I was serious. I had so many students who said, "Oh yeah, they're definitely going to win. They're definitely going to win because they won 3 years every other year on the even year." And so, the correlation was getting pretty strong. The more consistently that happens that they exist together, there were some who believed it was causation. was like, I'm not sure about that. I don't know that I would gamble on that, everybody, but it definitely was getting towards more of a strong correlation as opposed to a coincidence, right? So, the coincidence is, I had a student who said, I can't believe the Niners lost the Super Bowl. Reason was I didn't watch it live. I watched all the other 49er games live. I recorded this game because I had to work, and I watched it back, and they lost. Every single time I have recorded it, watched it live, they won. And so I'm like, yeah, I don't even think that that's a very strong correlation. That's more of a coincidence. You all probably have those, they call it superstition, right, sometimes. So causation and correlation really kind of similar but very different ideas, and I think a lot of times people, again, get those confused. Questions about it? Make sense? All right. And then we have authority. I'm going to try to write here. And authority basically says A is correct because B says so, and B is credible. Okay? A is correct because B says so, and B is credible. All right? So a lot of times, when you get your research and you're citing sources and you're trying to prove that something is true or something is good or bad for society or something is a good course of action, a new policy we should take, and you're citing sources that say that, yeah, this is correct action, or this is true, or this is good for society because of B being credible. We also have reasoning by analogy, which says, basically argues the similarities. A is similar to B, and therefore, it's like arguing precedent. We talked about that last time. If it's similar, then you could do the same thing. So for instance, we were talking about how the Housing First program had some positive impact in Salt Lake City, and Sacramento has a homelessness issue or unhoused issue, and therefore we should do the same thing that they did in Salt Lake City all those years ago, and hopefully we would have the similar result. It would be beneficial. Okay? So you're comparing a one-to-one, it's a one-to-one comparison, and you're arguing the similarities. Does that make sense? Okay? All right, see the head nods? And then last one is example. Reasoning by example, which basically argues similarities, but it's a one-to-many comparison. So for instance, if they're going to use the Housing First project in Salt Lake City as a model for all of the cities that have an unhoused issue, then it's reasoning by example. They're using it and comparing it to many different cities. Salt Lake City has a situation that's like Portland, that's like San Francisco, that's like Honolulu, that's like Sacramento. And so you're basically arguing the similarities. Make sense? Okay. So later on, we're going to talk about how to test reasoning and then identify them as fallacies if the reasoning doesn't check out, if you feel like it's faulty reasoning. Okay? But in the meantime, I want to give you another example of how this works. Okay? So let's say, I'll give you a visual here. Imagine that you have been on your whatever social media platform you follow, and you see that somebody that you knew from high school, you haven't seen in a lot of years, is now on it and wants to connect with you, right? And you're excited to see this person. You haven't been in touch with this person, and this person's in town and is working at a restaurant and invites you out to come to a late dinner. And you say, sweet, great to see you. I'll meet you at about 8:30, and you drive to that neighborhood and you look around and go, oh, it looks like a neighborhood that has a history of violent crime, perhaps. This is something that you know. It doesn't look super safe, but you park and you have to walk a few blocks to the restaurant. As you're walking to this restaurant to meet your friend, you look to your left and see a motel. It looks a little sketchy, and there's a door that's flat on its side, or just looks like it's been kicked off its hinges, and it's flat, all right? And you're nosy. It's like, you ever watch those horror movies where you're thinking, why are they risking their lives for this, right? Why are they? And so, but you investigate just like those folks in the horror movies, and you peek in, and you see this room that is in disarray. Okay, so you see, not in addition to the door, the curtain is off the curtain rod. It's been torn down. You see the television that's been kicked in. You see a mattress that is off its box spring and just laid out. And then you see a man on his back with a hole in his chest, bleeding profusely, okay? And a woman standing with a gun in her hand and it's smoking, okay? What happened? What happened? What happened? In that situation, what can you conclude? She shot him. Okay, so that's your claim. She shot him. Okay? She shot him. And the evidence we have, well, the door that's been kicked in, or at least looks like it has. We have the mattress off its box spring. We have the television that's been kicked in. We also have the curtain rod and the guy, hole in chest, and smoking gun, woman standing. Okay, so I'm going to change the scene a little bit. Let's say we arrest this woman, okay? And I am now the prosecuting attorney. I'm going to try to put this woman behind bars based on the evidence that you've seen, okay? How many of you believe that she deserves some time based on what you've seen? Let me see by a show of hands. Anybody? Yeah? 2 people? Okay? And so basically, those of you who believe that she deserves some time, ultimately has some culpability, right? Some blame for this. So you feel like she caused, you're thinking it's a causal argument that she shot him, right? That, how many of you feel like it's correlative right now? That they exist together, but we're not really sure about the causal link. Yeah? More correlative, correlation? Okay? So some people, we already got a couple people up here, most of you down here. Okay? So let's say I bring Dr. Rocio to the stand, okay? And she testifies and says that, and she's a forensic expert, and she says that the lines on the bullet that were found in the man matched the chamber of the gun. I watch Law and Order. See? The chamber of the gun, and they had the same markings. So the bullet that was in his chest came from the gun the woman was holding. How many of you think, I think she shot him? I had 2. Anybody else with that evidence?
I think she shot him, but I don't know if she deserves time because we don't know the circumstances.
Okay. So let me see. With that evidence, how many more? Let me see. I saw 1, 2, 3. Okay. Let's say we get Dr. Brianna over here who says the GSR, you know what that is?
Gunshot residue?
Gunshot residue. You watch Law and Order too.
Oh, yeah.
Gunshot residue found on her arm came from the gun. You still, anybody feel like she should get some time? Because she shot him, but you don't know the circumstances. I know that. Let me see the hands. At least you're buying the causal link.
I
Yeah?
believe she shot him, yes.
She shot him. Okay. Now, what happens if we get our cleaning man, Samuel, who has 20/20 vision, okay? He was looking through the window and he saw her cursing him out and heard him cursing her out and shoot. And then Samuel's bright guy, he doesn't stick around. He's like, I ran away, right? That's what he says on the stand. How many of you feel like she should have some time? Get some, 20, we haven't decided. How many believe she shot? Okay. All right. How many believe that she should have some years attached to this act? All right, yeah? And then I bring up Esteban. And Esteban says, this is my sister, and I was worried because she grabbed my gun. And she was so upset because her boyfriend was cheating. And I can't believe that this is what happened. And he gets up and that's what I put on the stand. How many believe, number one, she shot him and that also she should get some years? Yeah, now okay.
Now he deserves
All right. All right. So correlation is really, it's usually where they exist together, right? And until you heard some evidence, some credible witnesses, I don't know how credible they were, but it's really difficult to get to causation. And how this applies to you is, those of you who are doing the policy speech, you're going to have a problem and a solution existing together in the same speech. Okay? How many sources did I cite with my little scenario there?
How many sources?
Yeah, how many sources? Rocio, Brianna, Esteban, who else? Samuel. 4? And my research was on point there, right? I had some good sources. So I basically cited 4 credible witnesses, okay? 4 credible sources to move the audience from 2 people who agreed with me to the entire room, okay? And so the reason I bring that up is because a lot of times people complain about, 8 sources, Mr. Fab, that's too many. You can't get that many sources into my speech. Yeah, you can, definitely. I know that over the last couple decades, it's been something you can do. But also, the quality of your research is really going to impact if we buy a causal link or not, okay? Because if you're sitting there and you're citing genericwebsite.com or anything that we think might be dubious, we're not going to move from, the problem and the solution existing together to the solution actually having a causal impact and some benefit. Does that make sense? Okay. Question? So that's basically how the Toulmin model works. And I'm going to be sitting in the back of the room, and you all should be listening too, because I'm going to ask you to, listening for causation, I'm going to ask you at the end of the speech, at least to write it down, and when you give feedback, did you buy the causal link? Or did it just feel like kind of jumping through the hoops? Was there evidence that had you believing their solution or their plan would at least cause some benefit or some of the problem to be addressed? Does that make sense? All right. That's the Toulmin model.